Glad you're staying with us right here on The Exchange, where your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. Infrastructure is top of mind when it comes to the contributions of the Japan International Cooperation Agency to the Philippines. We now have an exchange with JICA Philippines Chief Representative Takema Sakamoto. Sakamoto-san, thank you so much for joining us on the exchange. Well, first of all, we just heard Secretary Jokno mention dozens, if not hundreds, of infrastructure projects. What is your impression of the push of this Marcos administration to boost the economy through infrastructure?
Thank you very much for having me today. And as for your question, simply saying the direction is right and very favorable. Actually, unfortunately, I have to say that the infrastructure development level in this lovely country is lagging behind ASEAN neighboring countries. So it should be developed.
Why are we lagging behind, Sakamoto-san?
I'm not sure very precisely, but simply saying, just as Mr. Jokno mentioned, in the past, the previous administration had a very tough, difficult, tough decision not to be able to allocate gigantic money for the infrastructure. So this is one background, I believe.
The Duterte administration pushed for the Build program.
Yes.
Now we're seeing the Marcos administration looking at the PPP, the public partnership programs, in terms of funding the infrastructure projects together with official development assistance and government funding. What are some of the big ticket infrastructure projects that are being funded right now by JICA?
Yes, for example, there are many, but one example is North-South railway, commuting railways. From Maros to now we are extending from the Clark International Airport to Calamba in Laguna. This is one. And another one is the first ever subway construction project in Metro Manila. And there are so many others. For example, in Mindanao, Davao Bypass, Davao Tunnel. And this is also the first ever long mountainous tunnel. We are supporting that as well.
And these projects that you just mentioned, Sakamoto-san, are we likely to see them finished and benefiting the Filipino people before the end of the Marcos administration?
It depends on the efforts to be done by the project owner, who are the government of the Philippines. Of course, we as a supporter, big supporters, trustable supporter, we will do our best effort to speed up. But of course, recently we had a pandemic period, so obviously in every country, in every project, we observed a sort of the delay. But nowadays, they are in a so-called full speed ahead. So I believe we can say nowadays we are on track,
And what are basically the benefits, Sakamoto-san, of using official development assistance or ODAs to fund infrastructure projects?
The first is the concessionality level. Of course, you can have so many alternatives to mobilize a gigantic fund for the investment for the future, like issuance of the national bond or the borrowing from the private banks and so on. But from the viewpoint of the concessionality, soft conditions, the ODA is the best, of course. And at the same time, in case of JICA, we can provide related technical advices, technical services, technical cooperations, in addition to the financial support. So you can estimate, you can envisage the so-called best mix of the hard support and soft support.
Of course, what's really important there when you're building roads, building bridges, transportation across cities and provinces, it's not only the funding, but also the technical know-how, especially from Japan, which basically provides really top-notch technical expertise in these kinds of infrastructure projects.
Right. For example, For example, MRT3 rehabilitation and maintenance work is a typical case. We provided the gigantic financial support to that project, and at the same time, we support the so-called technical transfer or the know-how sharing and so on. So that's why MRT3 is now realizing the reliable operations with only 4 minutes headway. before that, before our support, it had a 10 minutes headway. And the speed of the operation is nowadays we can see is 60 kilometers per hour. Before that, before our support, only 25 kilometers speed.
Over the past decades, we've always seen JICA very supportive of previous administrations. How much assistance, Sakamoto-san, is JICA anticipating to help the Philippines under the Marcos administration?
Okay, yeah, it's very difficult for me to answer because the decision maker should be the Japanese national taxpayer. So, of course, it depends on the discussion of the parliament in Japan and so on. So it's very difficult. But please do understand, I'm new here. I worked
been 1 year here
only
in the
1 year
Philippines.
here, but of course I would like to be here for good, you know. But anyway, last fiscal year, Japanese fiscal year starts from April to March, and we have just finished the last fiscal year. Last fiscal year, I signed over 400 billion Japanese yens loan agreements to the Philippines. And this is a very gigantic money comparing with other countries. Maybe it's the second biggest country, beneficiary countries among the world for the JICA support, just following India.
And apart from the usual projects that we've been talking about in infrastructure projects, does JICA also support climate change or energy projects?
Yes, of course. Actually, infrastructure, this word has a very wide, broad definition, you know. And just now, I introduced the so-called big-ticket projects. But of course, in addition to the big-ticket projects, we are supporting the so-called software infrastructure and other projects. For example, now you mentioned the climate change.
Yes.
In case of this, for example, Metro Manila, we have been supporting the so-called DRRM project, Disaster Risk Reduction and Management. Pacific Marikina River channel improvement is one of the very salient example, you know. We started that project since 1960s, I believe, 70s, I believe, from the support for the Mangahan Waterway, Spillway, Floodway. And that construction project was our support. And after the long-standing JICA support, we have a study. We calculated before and after, or without of JICA support. Before our support, without our support, at the time of the typhoon, not the Yolanda, but
Ondoy.
In 2020. At the time, we calculated roughly 1 million flood victims. But after our support, now we can reduce by 97%. Only 30,000 victims we can see.
With the support of JICA and the Japanese government, we will definitely benefit from these infrastructure projects between both countries.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us on the exchange. Takema Sakamoto, Chief Representative from the Japan International Cooperation Agency, Philippines office. And still ahead on the exchange, where your business is our business. With trillions of pesos in the pipeline, how will these infrastructure projects benefit ordinary Filipinos in terms of jobs, mobility, and better services? What are the things that we should be on the lookout for? InfoWatch Philippines joins us next. Keep it right here on CNN Philippines. News you can trust.